Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload. And you'll never miss a story again.
The knock came on a rainy Thursday. Not urgent, not aggressive, just steady, like someone who had nowhere else to be. I almost didn't answer. I was halfway through organizing old storage boxes in the attic, surrounded by the kind of memories people pack away when they're trying to move on. But something in that knock pulled me. When I opened the door, I saw a teenage girl standing on the porch, hood up, arms crossed, soaked to the bone. Her eyes met mine, dark and unblinking. "You're Andrew Scott, right?" she asked. I nodded. She pulled her hood back. "My name's Sophie," she said. "My mom was Elena." And just like that, my past was standing in front of me. Years ago, before the quiet life I'd built, before the house with no shared name on the deed, before the bookstore, before the solitude, I'd loved a woman named Elena. Loved her deeply, recklessly, briefly. It was the kind of love that scorches instead of settles, the kind you don't marry, the kind you remember in flashes, laughter too loud, fights too sharp, apologies too late. We weren't right for each other, and we knew it, but we clung to the idea of us until it hurt. When we ended, it was permanent, or so I thought. Now, standing in front of me, was a girl with Elena's eyes and a quiet storm in her voice. "She died," Sophie said simply. "A month ago." I stepped aside. No questions yet. Some truths don't need to be asked. She sat at the kitchen table like she'd been there before, looked around slowly, didn't touch anything. "I found your name in a box of her letters," she said. "She kept all the ones you wrote, even after you stopped writing back." I remembered those letters, the ones I wrote after we broke things off, trying to explain what neither of us had the words for when we were together. I stopped sending them when I realized she wasn't answering because she was trying to forget, or maybe because she'd already moved on. "She told me once," Sophie continued, "that you were the only person who ever really knew her." I sat across from her. "I don't know if that's true anymore," I said. She shrugged. She said a lot of things. I didn't ask what brought her here, not right away, but eventually she told me. She had no one. Her stepfather had disappeared after the funeral. No other relatives nearby. Just a friend's couch and a few bags of clothes. She wasn't looking for charity. She just needed something, somewhere. Someone who used to mean something to the woman she missed and resented in equal measure. I didn't say yes right away, but I didn't say no. Instead, I offered her the guest room, gave her space, told her she could stay until she figured out her next step. She accepted like she didn't expect it to last. That night, after she went to bed, I went looking for that old box of letters. I found them exactly where I left them, beneath a stack of forgotten journals and unopened holiday cards. I opened the last one I ever sent. The postmark was faint, but I remembered writing it on a cold December evening, alone in the same kitchen where Sophie had just sat. In it, I'd told Elena that I hoped she found peace, not with me, just peace. Now, years later, I wondered if she ever did. Over the next few weeks, Sophie and I learned how to exist in the same space without crowding each other. She was guarded, sarcastic, whip-smart. She didn't like small talk, didn't care for rules unless she made them. But she was also fiercely independent, the kind of person who cleaned up after herself even when no one asked her to. We didn't talk much about Elena. I could tell it was a wound she hadn't let scab over yet. But some nights, I'd catch her sitting on the porch with one of Elena's old scarves wrapped around her shoulders, staring at nothing. That's when I started talking, not to push her, but to give her pieces of the woman I knew, before Sophie knew her as a complicated, flawed mother. She loved thunderstorms, I told her once. Used to say the sound made her feel like the world was still alive. Sophie didn't respond, but the next time it rained, she left her window open. Slowly, stories turned into habits. Habits into routines. We started eating dinner together, watching old movies on weekends, not because we planned it, just because it felt easier than silence. One night she asked, "Why did you two break up?" I didn't lie. "We wanted different things," I said, "and we were afraid to say it out loud." "Like what?" "I wanted quiet. She wanted a revolution." Sophie nodded like she understood. She was always chasing something, she said. But I don't think she ever knew what. I didn't respond, because I wasn't sure if I agreed, or if I just didn't want to argue with a ghost. As the months passed, Sophie started calling the house home. Only once or twice, but it meant something. I started setting aside money for her college applications just in case. She never asked, but she knew. And then one afternoon, everything changed again. I was cleaning out an old filing cabinet when I found a folder tucked behind a drawer. Elena's handwriting, legal documents, custody filings, a letter addressed to me. I sat down slowly, opened the envelope. Inside was a single page. If something ever happens to me, it read, "Please look after her. She won't admit she needs it, but she does. She always has. I should have told you sooner. I was scared. I'm sorry." There was a birth certificate, too. And on it, under father's name, was my name, Andrew Scott. I read it 3 times before it sank in. Sophie wasn't just Elena's daughter. She was mine. I sat with the weight of that truth like it might crush me. All the years, the missed birthdays, the silence that wasn't hers to carry. I remembered her eyes the first day we met, dark, unblinking. I saw myself in them now. I didn't tell her that night, not because I wanted to lie, but because I didn't know how to speak a truth that would rewrite her entire life. She was upstairs, humming along to music in her room, probably reorganizing her books or painting her nails the way she always did when the day had been long. I sat at the kitchen table, Elena's letter in one hand and the birth certificate in the other, like they might start making sense if I held them long enough. I thought about all the little things, the way Sophie tilted her head when she was curious, how she picked olives off her pizza like it was a personal mission, the sharp wit, the stubborn independence, the way she could go from silence to sarcasm in seconds. I thought they were Elena's traits. Maybe they were mine too. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing on my porch again, soaked and defiant, asking if I was Andrew Scott. And I had been, just not the version she expected. The next morning, I stood outside her door for a full minute before knocking. "Yeah?" she called. "Can we talk?" She opened the door, still in her hoodie and socks, one earbud hanging loose. Her face was unreadable. "Sure," she said, stepping aside. I sat on the edge of her bed like I didn't belong there. She stayed standing, arms crossed, a wall already half built. "I found something yesterday," I began. "In storage, a letter from your mom, some papers." She waited. I handed her the folder. She opened it slowly, read the birth certificate first. Her hands didn't shake, but I saw her eyes move across the page like she was bracing for something to explode. Then she opened the letter. She didn't cry. She didn't even blink. When she finished, she looked up at me, and in a voice that barely cracked, she asked, "You didn't know?" I shook my head. "I swear to you, Sophie, I didn't know." She exhaled, a long, tired breath. "Okay," she said. And for a moment, that was all. No breakdown, no screaming. Just a teenage girl processing a second motherless grief. "I should have known," she whispered. "I always felt weird in that house, like I didn't belong to anyone." My chest tightened. "You do," I said. "You do now." She didn't respond right away. Then she asked, "Why didn't she tell you?" I wanted to say I didn't know, but deep down, I did. Because Elena was chaos and passion and fear all wrapped into one. Because she didn't trust permanence. Because she'd convinced herself she was protecting Sophie. Or herself. Or maybe even me. "I think she was scared," I finally said. "Of what it would change." Sophie nodded like she understood, even if she didn't forgive. "I don't know what to do with this," she said. "Neither do I replied. "But we don't have to figure it all out today." She folded the papers, slid them back into the folder, and set it on her desk. Then she sat beside me. Not close, not touching, but beside me. And that felt like more than enough. The next few weeks were quiet. Not tense, just careful, like we were both walking through a room full of glass. She still called me Andrew. I didn't push for anything else. I wasn't interested in claiming a title I hadn't earned. She had every right to keep me at arm's length. But slowly, the distance shortened. She started asking me things about when I met her mother, about what kind of kid I was, about my favorite books and why I always put salt on watermelon. And I answered honestly, every time. We never said the words father or daughter, not out loud, but they hung in the space between us, growing roots without needing to be named. One night, she came home late from school. She'd joined a photography club and stayed behind for an exhibition. She tossed her backpack down and said, "You coming to parent night next week?" It was the first time she'd called me anything close to a parent. I just smiled. "Yeah, I'll be there." Parent night was surreal. Sitting in tiny chairs listening to teachers describe Sophie as sharp, independent, a little intense. Watching her interact with classmates, seeing how people respected her without quite knowing how to approach her. I saw myself in her again, not just in her eyes now, but in the way she stood apart without asking to. On the way home, she asked if we could get burgers, not takeout, not delivery, a sit-down kind of meal. We sat in a booth with a flickering light overhead, eating fries and milkshakes like we'd been doing it for years. At one point, she leaned her chin on her hand and said, "You know, I used to imagine what it'd be like to have a dad." I didn't say anything. "I didn't picture you," she added. "No offense. None taken. But I think I like this version better." I smiled. So did she. At home that night, she left her door open for the first time since she moved in. A few months later, her college acceptance letters started arriving, some expected, some surprising. One was from a university not far from here, just a 40-minute drive, but far enough for independence. She asked me to help her visit the campus. We spent the day walking through dorms, touring buildings, eating bad cafeteria food, and listening to tour guides explain where the best parking spots were. She didn't say it out loud, but I could tell she was imagining her life there. That night as we drove back, she said, "If I go here, will you visit?" "Only if you want me to," I said. She turned to look at me. "I do." It wasn't dramatic, but it felt permanent. The day she moved in, we didn't hug, not at first. She was tense, nervous, excited, grieving the childhood she never fully had and stepping into something brand new. I helped her carry boxes, set up her desk, hang a photo of her and Elena on the wall. Before I left, I stood by the door. "Call me if you need anything," I said. She rolled her eyes. "Obviously." I hesitated. Then she hugged me, just for a second. But she didn't let go first. The ride home felt different, not empty, just full of all the things I didn't know I needed to feel again. Back at the house, I walked past her empty room and realized it didn't feel so quiet anymore. It felt like something had been completed, not ended. She called me that night, just to say hi. We talked about classes, professors, the strange smell in her dorm hallway. Before she hung up, she said, "Good night, Dad." I didn't respond right away. She waited. "Good night, Sophie," I said. And that was enough. The first real storm of the season rolled in on a Sunday afternoon, unannounced. One moment the sky was clear, and the next thunder pressed against the windows like it was asking to come in. I stood by the kitchen sink, coffee in hand, watching the trees bend beneath the weight of the wind. It had been nearly a year since Sophie moved out, a quiet year, a good one. The kind of year you don't write headlines about, but one that rebuilds something steady under your feet. She called often, texted more, sometimes just photos of her lunch or the campus cat that slept on her backpack, sometimes long paragraphs about her roommate or the book she couldn't put down. And every few weekends, she came home. She never asked to stay in the guest room anymore. Her old bedroom was hers again, decorated with new posters, fairy lights, and a growing collection of Polaroids taped above the desk. That Sunday, she showed up unannounced. Just walked in with a burst of cold air and a bag of groceries. "I figured you haven't eaten a vegetable since I left," she said, grinning. She was probably right. We made dinner together, pasta, garlic bread, a salad she didn't let me skip. The kind of meal that felt like it had been cooked 100 times before, and afterward we sat on the couch with mismatched socks, watching a documentary we both half cared about. Sophie leaned back and said, "You know, I used to think I'd never be able to say home without thinking of her." She didn't have to say Elena's name. I knew who she meant. But now, she continued, I think I can. Not because I've forgotten her, but because I don't feel like I'm betraying her by moving forward. I nodded slowly. That's what healing is. She glanced over at me. Do you ever think about who you might have been if you'd known? I knew what she meant. If I'd known from the beginning that she was my daughter. All the time, I said, but I don't let it eat me alive. I can't change what I didn't know. I can only show up now. She smiled at that. You're pretty good at it, I chuckled. Takes practice. That night, after she went to bed, I found myself walking into the attic. The storage boxes were still there. Some unopened. Some untouched since the day I discovered the letter. I sat beside them for a while, hands on my knees, breathing in the scent of old paper and time. I pulled out one of the journals I'd written during the years I thought I was healing from a heartbreak, not knowing I was also missing an entire chapter of my life. I flipped through pages until I landed on a sentence I had scribbled half asleep, almost angrily. If only I'd known what came after, I might have fought harder to hold on. Reading it now, I smiled, because I had come to learn that sometimes what comes after is better, not because it replaces what you lost, but because it teaches you how to show up differently when you get another chance. 2 weeks later, Sophie invited me to a campus event. She was presenting a photography series she'd been working on since the fall. I brought flowers. She rolled her eyes when I handed them over, but didn't hide her smile. Her display was simple. 6 large prints, black and white, arranged in a soft curve around a central piece. Each photo captured a moment that didn't need explaining. A cracked sidewalk, a woman watching rain through a window, a pair of shoes left at a doorstep, a hand reaching out of frame. But the last photo made my breath catch. It was me, unaware, sitting in the old armchair on the porch, a book in one hand, coffee in the other. The world behind me slightly blurred, but the expression on my face was clear. Stillness, presence, peace. The caption read, "Sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest love." I didn't cry, but something inside me softened, the way snow does before it melts. After the event, we went for a walk. No destination, just streets lit by street lamps and the hush of night. Sophie spoke about her classes, her plans, her fears. I mostly listened, but somewhere along the way she slipped her arm through mine, just like that. No words. And we walked like 2 people who didn't need anything from each other except to be there. Summer came fast that year. She moved back home for the break, took over the kitchen, turned the living room into a makeshift photo studio, left her laundry half folded, her dishes in the sink, her music too loud. It was glorious. One night, while we were doing the dishes, she said, "I never asked, what happened to you and her after the letter stopped?" I knew she meant Elena. I rinsed a plate before answering. I let her go. I thought it was the right thing to do. Was it? I thought about it. Then I nodded. Yeah, it was the only thing left to do. Sophie was quiet a moment. Then she said, "Thanks for not letting me go." And that was the thing. She had every right to. She could have read that letter, seen my name, and decided I didn't deserve a second chance. But she didn't. She gave me a door to walk through, and I did. Years later, when she graduated, I stood in the crowd with a lump in my throat the size of a planet. She crossed the stage, received her diploma, smiled for the cameras, but the second her eyes found mine, she waved like a little girl who'd won a gold star. After the ceremony, she introduced me to her friends, her professors, her roommates' parents. "This is my dad," she said every time. She didn't hesitate. Not once. Back home, I finally hung a frame in the hallway that had been waiting for something worthy. It held one of her black and white prints, the one of the porch, the chair, the quiet man in his own world. Below it I added a small plaque, "For the things we find just in time." Because that's what she was. Not a second chance, not a correction, but a beginning. One I never saw coming, but one I'd carry with me for the rest of my life.